A high-quality MiraWELD installation needs highly trained installers. Waterproofing contractors with skilled welders know the correct tools, procedures, and conditions required to apply and weld the MiraWELD Blindside Waterproofing system. Here are the tools and equipment you will need to properly install MiraWELD. Standard cutting, marking, and measuring tools. Installation tools. And finally, CCW accessories specifically manufactured to simplify installation. All MiraWELD seams should be hot air welded, and all welds must be continuous. Because there are several options with hot air welding equipment, and there is more than one combination of temperature and speed settings that will result in a good weld, begin each day by setting up the equipment and preparing a test weld. First, follow manufacturer's recommendations and turn on the welding equipment. Next, make a test weld. Cut 2 strips of MiraWELD. Remove the release liner. Clean TPO selvage on both membranes using weathered membrane cleaner. Let dry before welding, typically 10 to 15 minutes depending on ambient temperatures. Next, overlap test patches leaving a ½ inch of exposed TPO selvage. Perform the test weld. Position the welder properly at the seam and weld the 2 strips of MiraWELD together. Proceed along the full length of the seam. Allow to cool. This is a good time to clean the welding nozzle. Using a stiff brass brush, scrub away debris. Do this throughout the day to ensure a clean nozzle and to make sure the air outlet holes are unobstructed. Now that the membrane is cool, perform test cuts. Cut the test patch into ½ inch wide strips. Using pliers, tear the test sample apart. When separated, examine the test sample. A satisfactory weld is achieved when the TPO consistently and uniformly delaminates from the reinforcing fabric. All welded seams should be probed to ensure welding integrity and continuity prior to applying the detail tape. Seams should cool before probing. Using a seam probe, draw the tip of the tool along the edge of the welded seam. Apply a slight pressure to the seam to check the weld between both sheets. The tool will not penetrate the lap area in a properly welded seam. If the tool penetrates the lap area, use a handheld welder and silicone roller to make repairs. Probe the repaired seams again after they have cooled completely. Perform test welds at the beginning of each day and every time the welding process is interrupted, like lunch breaks, change of site conditions, or when the welder is shut down. Time spent constructing prefabricated details can save time and money on the job site. Prefabricated details are simple to construct using a work table and a jig. For this mock-up, we are using a prefabricated MiraWELD inside corner and MiraWELD outside corner with a CCW TPO flashing strip. Start by creating a transition strip using TPO flashing and a piece of MiraWELD V. Overlap the flashing with the MiraWELD V. Weld the flashing to the MiraWELD membrane and roll the seam. Now take the MiraWELD inside corner and slide it under the transition strip. Leave a ½ inch of exposed TPO between the inside corner and transition strip. Starting at the corner, weld and roll towards the opposite end of the seam. Next, slide the MiraWELD outside corner under the transition strip. Beginning at the corner, weld and roll towards the opposite end of the seam. Take the completed assembly to a work table. Fold the membrane around a corner jig and weld the bottom seams. Wait 15 minutes for seams to cool and then probe all seams. Pay special attention to sections of the seams that change direction. These areas are where welding flaws most commonly occur. Repair as necessary. This demonstration shows general field installation steps for the MiraWELD Blindside Waterproofing system for underslab to a blindside wall. Typically, 1 to 2 crew members will install and detail membrane, while a welder follows. Start installation at a corner using a MiraWELD inside corner or outside corner. Attach the prefabricated corner to the shoring system using manufacturer-approved fasteners. Be sure fasteners are outside the welding area. Fasten the membrane tightly against the shoring system. This will prevent membrane tenting and draping that will result in a failed weld. Now, construct a transition detail. Place the prefabricated MiraWELD detail strip under the MiraWELD H membrane. Clean the detail strip selvages and the underside of the MiraWELD H with weathered membrane cleaner. Once the cleaner has flashed off, position the welder properly at the seam, leaving a ½ inch of exposed TPO. Now, weld the MiraWELD H to the detail strip. Position the welder properly at the seam. Proceed to weld the seam, ensuring a minimum 1½ inch wide continuous weld is achieved. If needed, finish the seam using a handheld welder and silicone roller. The welded assembly is ready to attach to the shoring system. Align the assembly along the vertical and horizontal edges of the corner detail, leaving a ½ inch of exposed TPO. Make sure the detail strip aligns tightly against the shoring system. Once membrane is properly aligned, fasten the top edge of the MiraWELD detail strip to the shoring system. Make sure fasteners are outside the seam area needed for welding. Now, attach the pre-detailed corners to the MiraWELD detail strip and MiraWELD H. If necessary, trim the membrane as needed so that there is a ½ inch of exposed TPO. Once again, check that the MiraWELD fits tight against the shoring system. Starting at the corner, use a handheld welder and silicone roller to weld the seam along the horizontal section, followed by the vertical section. Proceed to weld the seam, ensuring a minimum 1½ inch wide continuous weld is achieved. This segment shows how to create a continuous end lap or tie-in strip using the CCW TPO flashing strip, used, for example, between adjacent concrete pour sections. First, extend the MiraWELD system, typically 1 foot beyond the structural reinforcement steel and concrete formwork or bulkhead, and protect the MiraWELD system from damage during concrete placement and other related work. Remove any temporary protection and clean the underside of the MiraWELD H, MiraWELD detail strip, and MiraWELD V, and the top side of the CCW TPO flashing strip with weathered membrane cleaner. Slide the flashing strip under the membranes and ensure that there is 5 inches of exposed flashing strip to tie into the adjacent section of the MiraWELD system. Check that the assembly is tight against the shoring system. Now, weld the assembly to the flashing strip. Position the welder properly at the seam. Proceed to weld the seam, ensuring a minimum 1½ inch wide continuous weld is achieved. If needed, finish the seam using a handheld welder and silicone roller. Check the horizontal seam for unwelded areas and repair using a handheld welder and silicone roller. Continue welding up the vertical seam and roll with a silicone roller. Next, position the next section of CCW TPO flashing strip on the shoring system and align and overlap this strip with the strip below. Fasten the strip to the shoring system with fasteners along the outer edges as necessary, and be sure fasteners are outside the welding area. Proceed to weld the strips together, ensuring a minimum 1½ inch wide continuous weld is achieved. CCW manufactures prefabricated tieback covers in many sizes for installation over soil anchors. These should be fastened to the wall prior to installing the MiraWELD V. To begin the MiraWELD V installation, align the sheet and overlap the transition strip below. Leave a ½ inch of exposed TPO for welding. Crease the membrane at both inside and outside corners to make sure the membrane fits tight. Now, fasten the membrane to the shoring system. Continue installation by fastening overlapping MiraWELD V sheets to the shoring system. Repeat steps for attaching new MiraWELD V sheet and working around tieback cover. Again, align the MiraWELD V to the MiraWELD detail strip below, leaving a ½ inch of exposed TPO for welding. Fasten it to the shoring system. Cut and trim the membrane 4 inches from the base of the tieback cover. Use a handheld welder and silicone roller to attach the membrane to the tieback cover. Check that you have a continuous weld around the tieback flange by probing the seams. Mark any deficiencies for the welder to make repairs. As a final step, all welded seams around the tieback cover should be covered with MiraPly detail tape. First, score and remove the release liner 4 inches from the edge of the MiraWELD. Check that surface is clean and all of the release liner is removed. Now, install MiraPly detail tape centered over the edge of the MiraWELD V. The tape should overlap 3 inches onto the flange and 3 inches onto the membrane. Cut the detail tape to length. Pull the release liner and press it onto the flange and membrane. Remove the release liner and roll the tape with a silicone roller using firm hand pressure. Seal all edges, step-downs, and T-joints with a detailing roller or the edge of the silicone roller. Repeat this process on all sides of the tieback cover. Continue installing the MiraPly detail tape along all welded seams of the MiraWELD system. Unroll and cut the detail tape to match the length of the welded seam. Pull the release liner, center it over the seam, and roll the tape with a silicone roller using firm hand pressure. Make sure to seal the edges, step-downs, and T-joints with a detailing roller or the edge of the silicone roller to prevent water channels along the seam. Third-party inspectors will look for a nice, crisp edge, so it's always a good idea to self-inspect. Repeat the process to seal all seams. Once the MiraWELD system is fully installed, inspect the assembly. Look for stray pieces of release liner, loose edges, and other defects. Mark each for repair and continue the inspection. Make final repairs. Congratulations! Your job is now protected by the patented MiraWELD Blindside Waterproofing system.